Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the slight delay, but we're happy everything is coming together. We welcome you to our session by the name Building Bridges, Migration Management, Economic Integration, and Regional Resilience. My name is Elsy Abi Assi. I am the principal presenter at Al Jazeera Arabic, and I'm happy to see you all, and I hope we have a good session with our esteemed guests. We are here to discuss a phenomenon that is not just a policy challenge, it is a defining political battle of our time. It's human mobility. Across the Mediterranean and its strategic intersection with the Gulf, the movement of people is testing the foundational values of the European Union, fueling political polarization and generating unprecedented humanitarian and security demands. On the front lines in nations like Malta and Cyprus, migration is a daily diplomatic and physical reality, one that pits humanitarian duty against national security and regional solidarity against domestic political pressures. In this session, we want to explore how countries and entities are facing all these challenges, how they are dealing with climate change, with the economic aspect of migration, and how essentially can bridges be built to deal collectively and humanely with this issue. We would like to welcome our esteemed guests on this panel. His Excellency Ian Borg, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Malta. His Excellency Constantinos Kombos, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Cyprus. Hello. His Excellency Dimitris Avramopoulos, the former European Commissioner on Migration, Home Affairs and Security, and the former Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Defense. And Mr. Panagiotis Mihalos, the founder of George Mihalos Foundation and the Nisiros Dialogues Bridging the East Med platform. Hello, everybody. So we are here under the title Building Bridges, and that compels me to ask about how you received yesterday what jumped to the forefront of the political agenda, of the news agenda in the world, essentially, what the US national security strategy had to say about Europe on the issue of migration, calling it a threat of civilizational erasure at the hands of immigrants and its mainstream leaders. And we'd like to hear the thoughts of Mr. Borg, perhaps.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Of course, we are very much aware of the challenges that we are facing in Europe, but not only. Even America itself has its own challenges when it comes to migration. And in my opinion, migration becomes a crisis when cooperation fails. And in a world where we are so proud that innovation and technology can predict almost everything, I'm pretty sure that if countries come together, we can predict and manage better, having a forward-looking framework to manage migration. Because if well managed, in my opinion, moving and offering opportunities to people is an asset and not a problem. We need foreign labor in each and every sector of our economy in Europe. So the issue is that we're not able to manage it well, and it's not only Europe. It's the US. It's also of course countries of origin, countries that are used in transit. Of course, we have to deal with smugglers, and dealing with smugglers, in my opinion, the best way to do it is by create legal opportunities and therefore merit-based and forecasting the needs and the opportunities that can be created in destination countries. So many to discuss, but as an introduction, this is my first comment I'd like to say.
Mr. Kombos, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what the U.S. national security strategy called a civilizational erasure that might happen to Europe because of migration.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting and dense document. I've read it, I haven't studied it yet in the way that it deserves to be studied. First reaction, I don't see something that we haven't heard or we haven't thought about being the positioning in general of the US, especially as regards migration. If one follows the internal situation, this is a very hot political issue. So it's also an issue of how you see it. I mean, I would agree that the migration situation is a big problem. You can find various layers as to that problem, whether that's in relation to the economy, social cohesion, education systems, and so on, national security sometimes. But at the end of the day, we can converge that there is a problem. And the problem is primarily political. The migration issue is, at its heart, a very hot political concept and issue. And it's also tempting sometimes as politicians to react to it by adopting the populist approach. But at the end of the day, there is an antithetical element to it in the sense that we all depend on migration in terms of the labor market. So it's about finding the right balance and also trying to frame the political discussion, the political debate about such issues in a way that elevates the positives, but also we also agree that you need a hard line in terms of illegal migration. So this is a dichotomy, distinction that we need to make absolutely clear that it's very well perceived, and it's also something we communicate to our public opinions. The American approach is very clear in relation to this issue. I see elements of convergence in relation to that. I see also that in terms of the European approach, it's something that we have tried to regulate, to manage. But at the end of the day, the migration problem is a political problem, and let's not forget it's not a new problem. It's an issue that's been there since 1930 onwards, in various forms, but we usually tend to ignore the situation when things go in a positive direction. It's a recoil kind of situation. We go back, but then it's still there. So I would think that it's not about solving the problem as such, it's about managing it. And managing it in a way that creates convergences of approach. As Ian said, you cannot handle this issue on your own. You need regional cooperation, but also there are elements of best practices that one can adopt if you look at different examples. If the policy direction is similar, then that's a point of convergence and dialogue, even with the US and with the example that you just gave.
Mr. Avramopoulos, the esteemed guests are talking about striking a balance between the needs and between trying to find a balance in terms of tackling this problem. How do you view that? How do you view striking this balance?
When you ask me the question, you push me to recall the days that this phenomenon knocked on the door of the European Union. It was in the year 2015, as you remember. 5 months after I was designated commissioner, we had the very first uncontrolled migratory flows and the very first terrorist attack. So I was responsible both for security and migration. Europe had been taken by surprise. Europe didn't know how to cope with this issue. So we started building the new architecture of our migration policy. But let's go deeper now. It's not easy to be managed because unfortunately migration has taken global dimensions. Right now we are here in Doha. It's good for you to know that more than 400 million people around the world are on the move. They want to go somewhere. And we all know the root causes of migration: persecution, dictatorships, climate change. That's where we should start. Yesterday, I had a meeting here with the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, with whom we had been cooperating very closely at that time, and he had accepted my proposal to convene an extraordinary General Assembly of the United Nations in order to address this issue on a global basis. They all met, all leaders in New York, but nothing happened. In the meantime, migration became a domestic issue. What Mr. Kombos said before, it is exerting a huge power, a huge influence within the political systems of Europe and now of the whole world. This is what fueled xenophobia, populism, and nationalism. And nowadays we see that there is a wave all around Europe who brings in power all these forces. This will be a big problem in managing migration in the future. Let me tell you also something else. Europe is an aging continent. Europe is in need of migrants. But what Europe did not have was legal pathways for the ones who want to come to Europe. And something else. The countries that are suffering more are the front-line member states like Malta, like Cyprus, like Italy, or like Spain and Greece, of course. But now let's say something else. You see the differences between the member states of the European Union. Northern Europeans do not think the same as we do in the South. They believe that it's a problem of the South. And the last pact that was signed in Brussels, for me, it's a failure of the European policy. Because the countries under pressure cannot cope, cannot meet these challenges in a very successful way. So we need solidarity. Solidarity, fair burden sharing. You know that solidarity and responsibility are the basic principles upon which Europe is built. But what kind of solidarity? Selective solidarity, subjective solidarity. This will lead to a European failure in the future. And this is a big problem, because if Europe exists because of these two values that are at stake right now. Now, the last point. Migration came to stay. As it was said before, it is not a new phenomenon. We in Europe, we have experienced that many times in the past. But is Europe now prepared? Is the whole world prepared? I finish with one remark. It is the moment for the international community to take its responsibilities. So what I believe is that the global leadership should focus on that, because it's a problem of Europe today, of the United States tomorrow, of Asia the day after tomorrow. So it has to be addressed on a global scale. And this is a big challenge for the future. Otherwise, it will be a problem domestically in all countries, but also globally in relation to all these big problems. And as I said before, whether we like it or not, we need migrants. And don't forget something else. We represent here somehow countries that contributed to the building of societies far away in the world. United States, Australia, they are all migrants countries. So it is not a question of how to cope with this issue. It's how to understand it and to integrate in our strategy for the future, because it came to stay and it will stay for many, many decades.
Thank you. Mr. Mihalos, this is an interesting point Mr. Avramopoulos makes about the partnership or the relation to this issue between the Southern European countries and the Northern European countries. This session is called Building Bridges. When at the Niceros Dialogues you decided to expand on that, on building bridges, what did you mean by building bridges? Between who and whom?
Thank you very much, Elsy. Let me apologize for the delay. We were late because we're running late with a private lunch with the Prime Minister of Qatar, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdullah Rahman. I had the honor of being also with His Excellency, Mr. Borg, at this lunch. We had a very, very substantial discussion on Gaza. And let me tell you that it's positive of what I think is coming later in the next few weeks. I would like to thank you all for coming to this session. I'd like, first of all, to thank, if I can have this parenthesis, the management of Doha Forum and the people of Doha Forum for this extraordinary forum they put together this year. It's the 23rd. I've been coming for the last 15, I believe. It's quite a phenomenon of what's happening in this one. I would also like to congratulate the Qatar government, specifically and especially the Prime Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman, for their contribution to peace, mediation, and the results-oriented effort that they are doing. Migration. When we create the vision of Nisiros Dialogues and the bridges you are referring to, is precisely to bridge nations, cultures, civilizations, being in the center of East Med, Greece, my ancestral island, Nisiros, a volcanic island on the edge of Aegean touching the Mediterranean. That gave us the push to create this platform for a positive exchange of ideas, not only for East Med, but globally. Being here at the Doha Forum, I think it is a testament to the efforts that all my people put together. Coming now and taking it from where Mr. Avramopoulos left it. Migration, ladies and gentlemen, is no longer a regional or static, no longer a temporary crisis. It is structural, it is global, and its reality touches not just the region, it touches the whole world. Security, human dignity, economic development, social cohesion, all these things at once. So it's a most critical issue. And nowhere are the dynamics more stronger than in East Med. I would like to ask, therefore, a question to all our distinguished panelists, taking it from where Mr. Avramopoulos left it. Despite the scale and duration of this phenomenon, why do you think a substantial, coordinated, regional and global mechanism for managing this migration problem is still absent? Why is the European Union not creating a unified, legal framework to deal with these issues? Not just the entry of migration, but the economic involvement and integration of refugees.
Perhaps Mr. Avramopoulos would like to respond.
Let me tell you that the European Union right now is divided and fragmented regarding migration. Unfortunately, all those steps had been made before. The follow-up is not to the right direction. As I said before, Northern European countries are thinking differently compared to the Southern European countries. We need a more inclusive, more holistic approach on that. It has become a huge problem for Europe and for the future of Europe. Why do you say that? Actually, Europe started changing from the moment migration appeared on the scene. Populism. On the top of that, we have nationalism. As I said before, xenophobia. It was linked directly to security. I was the one who witnessed firsthand the very first, as I said before, of terrorist attacks. If you know that most of the perpetrators of the terrorist attacks were not migrants, most of them were homegrown people in some countries of Europe. So the problem was domestic in these countries, why these people had not been integrated. But as it was said before, I believe it is the moment to think and act in a more drastic way, because migration will be always there. You know that in some countries of the European Union, migrants represent approximately 10 to 15% of the population. What are you going to do with them? Are you going to expel them? No, integrate them. But as Panagiotis said before, it is very important immediately to establish legal pathways for the ones who want to come to Europe. You know, right now, Europe is in need of workforce because locals are doing other things. Where are you going to find them? And then, migration is also an opportunity for countries to start approaching each other. Migration can become a bridge between cultures and civilizations. It is one of the issues we are going to discuss very soon in Riyadh, in 10 days from now, in the framework of the Alliance of Civilizations. So migration is touching all aspects of our life: economic, political, geopolitical developments. And of course, to think more seriously of how can European Union support the countries under pressure, like Malta, like Greece, like Cyprus. Unfortunately, the last pact, I said in the beginning, that was signed, that was adopted in Brussels, for me, does not represent to the real needs of migration. It is very much influenced by some countries who want to get rid of this phenomenon. They don't understand that it is to the detriment of Europe if they continue like this.
Let's hear you, Mr. Borg, expand on that. Malta, in its geographic position and all the challenges it is facing due to migration, what is Malta's view on how the European Union should go forward in terms of facing this crisis?
Thank you. I envy my good friend Dimitris that he now has the luxury to talk freely. Yeah, I look forward to that day that I can do the same. However, he is spot on.
This is the purpose of Nisiro's dialogue. You can talk freely.
But look, I will tell you what Malta did in the past years, and that is also why we are at the moment managing our little part, fairly well. And it's because we understood the appetite or the lack of appetite we have with our brothers and sisters in Europe, and decided to build bridges looking south. So we are cooperating well with our neighbors in the south, be it Libya, Tunisia, and I think other neighboring countries are doing just that as well. For example, our relationship with Libya and also Italy with Tunisia. First of all, you cannot build bridges with countries and peoples and neighbors that you want to judge. So first thing is that you cannot be judgmental and try to impose democratization and values. And this is something that we understand as Malta and that we practice it. Yes, we believe our values and our systems may be the best.
How would you assess right now this relationship between you and the southern countries you're referring to?
Well, we have, as I told you, excellent cooperation with Libya, especially with the coast guards in the west and in the east, because ultimately our coast guards, their coast guards, they are being called on a daily basis to save lives at sea. So first and foremost, we have to save the lives at sea. We need early warnings, and we need shared responsibility. Shared responsibility that someone is going for that boat, because on that boat there are human beings. They are not just numbers. How many times media is reporting about vessels with 70 people. Those are 70 human beings with families, with stories, and with talent as well. Most probably they are fleeing because they want to use their talents in a better economy. And that's what our fathers did decades ago when they flew to, well, not flew, sailed at that time to Australia and to the Americas. So my point is, we understood that it's not easy to build bridges with our European friends because not everyone wants shared responsibility. So we decided to build them south, and we are doing relatively well with Libya and Tunisia.
Thank you. How about Cyprus, Mr. Kombos? Cyprus seems to be facing the challenge from the east. Also, the regional conflicts in the east have also affected this phenomenon, the phenomenon of migration. Can you describe to us what are the challenges that Cyprus is facing, and how is it tackling it, also in partnership with the eastern countries, or the countries to its east?
It's one of these files where we think Cyprus and the European Union could always do more, but at the same time we need to be a bit more optimistic in terms of our assessment. The European Union has been supportive. Yes, there is a clear difference of opinion as regards the North and the South as to how they assess the risk. It's different if you are an entry point. It's different in the case you are an island. And there is also the possibility of being seen as a springboard for moving further, which is practically impossible. So the European Union has supported us in terms of funding, in terms of institutional capacity, but also in terms of supporting the neighboring countries that are the source for migration flows. We have seen that with Lebanon. We have seen that with countries that have been doing a lot in terms of keeping back the flows, like Egypt. So we see ourselves in the European Union, in part, Cyprus, as the whisperer of the region in terms of how we can promote their interests vis-à-vis the European Union, actually because it's also in our national interest, and by definition, this is also helping the European Union in the long run. We have faced serious challenges in Cyprus, but right now the numbers are very good. In the sense that we have, the comparison I'm making now is between 2025 and 2022, when it was the peak of the migration flows. This year we are 86% down in terms of arrivals, 87% down in terms of asylum applications. We have managed to limit the time of assessing applications to 1.5 to 2 months. It was 6+ in 2022. We have a 95% rejection rate in terms of asylum applications. And most importantly, this is what Ian was touching upon before, the cooperation with countries in the region. In terms of returns, we have numbers right now that basically are equivalent to 1% of our population. Let's think about this. In 2025, almost 1% of the total population that were illegal migrants have been returned. This is because of excellent cooperation with Syria, with Lebanon, with EU member states like Germany, like France, that have accepted these individuals back. But at the same time, this is creating a problem. Here is the paradox, if you like. We have an economy that is growing 3.6%. Unemployment is just below 4%. The economy is doing rather well. GDP, the sovereign debt is approaching 55% of the GDP. So this means the economy needs labor. And 1/3 of the labor force are migrants, legal migrants. We have 17% of the population being third country migrants. So we don't have the luxury of being absolute in our approach. We need legal migration, and this is what we have been doing in terms of arrangements with Egypt. We have a mobility agreement in place with Egypt, like Greece has done. We are discussing the same with India. So it's a very complex situation where you need to be very careful not to get carried away by your success in terms of numbers, because at the end of the day, this is ephemeral, and it could change very drastically if you have, for example, a regional conflict that becomes a new source. So it's for this reason we are very much concerned about the stability in Syria, and we want to be fully supportive of Syria in terms of ensuring their institutional capacity and taking further the level of cooperation, because it's in our interest, it's in their interest, and it's also in the interest of the European Union.
Mr. Mihalos, you had another question.
Yes,
Let me just say that we don't have a lot of time anymore because we started a bit late. We want to leave some time for some questions probably from the audience.
Oh, wonderful.
You and Mr. Avramopoulos, but let's hear Mr. Mihalos first.
I would like to touch on what Ian mentioned and congratulate Ian for the practical approach you took on the issue of communication, collaboration, understanding. And we're talking about bridges. Let me say that when I envisioned this dialogue, a critical part of the dialogue is the representative from Turkey. Turkey accepted immediately to be on this dialogue, but unfortunately, for unforeseen reasons, they canceled the last moment the Minister of Interior and Migration of Turkey, because I cannot see a dialogue on migration for East Mediterranean without the Turkish participation. I must say that in Greece, we had major issues on migration back in 2015, 2016, and 2020, and it was handled quite well in communication with the Turkish part, and indeed, most of these issues have been eliminated. However, I would like to emphasize in this dialogue that the collaboration, the dialogue, the bridging between Greece and Turkey is not only critical for the region, it's not only critical for East Med and Greece, but for the European Union, Dimitri. That is extremely important, this collaboration between Greece and Turkey. And the last one I would like to say, that was also touched upon, at one time, a number of years ago, the issue of investment, of mega investments in the countries of origin were raised, and it was on the table. That debate and discussion has disappeared. Don't we need to visit that?
Mr. Avramopoulos, you had something to say, but also
Yes.
I also want
Yes,
to
I would
ask you one more question about the most valuable lessons probably learned from the 2015 crisis. And you were at the head of your responsibilities back then. If there is one very important lesson, what would that be?
First of all, that we have to pass from managing a crisis to strategic governance. This is the answer on that. And unfortunately, neither Europeans nor the others are thinking strategically. They are looking inwards, how the domestic audience and the domestic electorate will react to their policies. And this is what is fueling what I said before. But let me tell you something. I take the torch from Panagiotis. Regional cooperation is very important. And cooperation with all these countries of origin. I have been traveling myself during my tenure as European Commissioner to all countries of Northern Africa, Middle East, and the countries of Sahel. I will tell you something which for me was very paradoxal. Most of these countries do not recognize their citizens. It sounds strange. If one European citizen disappears, then the whole system is running behind to find him. They say, no, they are not ours. They are not ours, because at that time we were discussing how can we proceed to return all the ones who are illegally in Europe. Returns, because it is part of the new pact that was signed in Brussels, cannot be done very easily. Because no one of these countries is ready to accept. We have tried it many times before. So we have to start thinking globally, how can we address this issue. Regarding Turkey, I was the one who had negotiated the EU-Turkey statement. It was not an agreement, it was a statement. It was respected, I can tell you, by Turkey for a long time. The only problem we had to face, especially in Greece, was when we had this problem on Evros. At that time, the Greek government did very well to stop all these illegal migration waves from Turkey. But this was done not because Turkey was not respecting the EU-Turkey statement, but Evros was excluded from this agreement at that time. But for all these years, it worked. And so when we talk about building bridges, migration can become a tool of understanding and bridge-building process among countries of the region, especially of the Mediterranean, because that's where the problem is. I say that the problem is there also from a humanitarian point of view. Last night, 17 persons were found dead on a boat on the coasts of Crete. If you put together the number of people that have died during the last 10 years, it goes up to 25,000 people. I mean, how can you ignore that? All these people, why do they leave their countries? For many reasons, as I said before, persecutions, dictatorships, wars. Nothing will stop them from going where they want to go. And most of them, they want to come to Europe. And the majority of them, they want to go to Germany and Sweden, but they have to cross all countries in the south. So, yes, all these people, they are on the move. How can you address this issue in their countries? By providing these countries with huge development programs. This is the role of Europe. Europe is a big economic power. Unfortunately, it's not becoming a geopolitical power for other reasons. We can talk about it if you want. But from an economic point of view, Europe can help these countries to address these issues on the ground.
We want to talk about climate change, factors like climate change and trafficking and all these factors that are affecting this. But I want to give a chance maybe to our audience if they would like to ask a few questions. Yes, in the back. Yes.
Sayed Moashah from the Geneva Graduate Institute. I also work with Afghan refugees. You know, one thing that in my research that I've come across, this prevailing idea, this Malthusian philosophy that we don't have enough. How much of that is driving policy in a lot of these countries? Now, that is a failed philosophical standpoint that a lot of countries use. We don't have enough jobs, we don't have enough space. You know, this was the same, forgive me, thought process that Hitler had. That we don't have enough land. We don't have enough land, so we have to take over parts of Lebensraum. That was the idea, that this land we need to for the German people. So the idea that I'm trying to say is this: how much of this Malthusian thinking is in the background that's driving the policy? Because I think that's a big issue in what the research that I've come across. So I'd like your thoughts on that.
Maybe we'd like to hear that the response from the esteemed ministers, Mr. Borg.
Well, I mean, the two ministers you have here are coming from island states. So we will not talk about land space. Our problem, I think, is that on this panel we are quite like-minded, and we are doing our best to manage the situation, because not everyone is sharing the same responsibility as we are. So, whilst I value very much the question, I think we need a wider panel to reflect such position, because these are most of our arguments as well when we are with our colleagues in Brussels. So. I don't know whether Constantinos
What do you think, Mr.
can do
Kombos?
better than me on this one.
Look, it's also about what is triggering people to get on a boat, because as islands, this is the main route. Yes, sometimes it's a war, a crisis. Most of the time it's the economic situation, but primarily it's the hope, a combination of hope and fear. Now, this could be a situation you are facing because something is happening in a specific country. And it's also about geographical proximity. In our case, we are facing threats from neighboring countries because of things that are happening. We have seen incidents back in Cyprus where someone left from an African country, got on a plane, managed to arrive somehow to Cyprus on a student university visa, but that person was 12 years old. So how did that happen? How do you get through airport security if you are transiting to reach Cyprus? And this is something that, if you allow me, links to the earlier point about the gatekeepers. There are countries that have this role, in terms of geography, in terms of capacity, to act as gatekeepers to keep the flows at the first entry point. Yes, the EU has tried to incentivize this country because they are carrying a heavy burden as well and they need to be supported. But, you know, the value of a gatekeeper is that he also has the key. And it's very important whether the key is being used selectively. Sometimes we turn a blind eye to this fact. So what I'm trying to say, it's not so much about space. This is not the issue. It's about a crisis, the fear of a crisis, but also the hope for a better future. And this has been the recipe for migration for decades. It's not something new. What has changed right now is the speed with which a crisis can grow and spread. And as a first entry country, like Malta, like Cyprus, like Greece, we have to keep persuading our European partners that this is a general problem, but it also has a very important localized dimension. It has idiosyncrasies. And I will disagree partly with Mr. Avramopoulos here about the global or the regional or the European strategy as such. I don't think it's working. This is not how we can manage this. It's about finding tailor-made solutions in relation to specific countries that are facing specific problems.
Yes.
There are, if I may, there was
you.
the incident, the situation with Ukraine and the refugees from Ukraine. Cyprus, which is so far away geographically from Ukraine, at some point, 7% of the population were Ukrainian refugees. Now it's about 2.5%. So it's not like we don't want the refugees. On the contrary, part of the country, part of the population are refugees in Cyprus. It's about finding the right ways to integrate them and make them part of the economic process.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I'm being told that we need to finish. As you can see, there's a big clock in red numbers in front of us. I want to thank you all very much for this cooperation. Thank you, Mr. Mihalos. I wish we had more time to expand more, but I think it's enough for now. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Elsy.
Thank you.
Well done.